Who's it going to be? Gyokeres, Sesko, or neither? At this point, who the hell actually knows? Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, how are we doing? Welcome back to the show. Hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. Back in familiar surroundings today. Hopefully the picture's better. Hopefully the sound is better. I was on the move yesterday, had something come up and I needed to head down to the original Casa de Symeou, and therefore we wasn't as prepped for the show as we'd normally be, and we certainly didn't have the same quality as a result of me using this headset thing that used to be quite good, but all of a sudden sounds a bit rubbish, and I have no idea why. Anyway, enough about that. We're going to talk transfers on today's show. I know that's what everybody's interested in. I know that's what all the debates are around at the moment. I'm finding this tiresome. And it's not the first time I've said it since the season ended, and it probably won't be the last. Who will it be? Gyokeres or Sesko? There's this unquenchable thirst for updates at the moment, and people are literally clutching onto any tiny little thing and trying to create narratives and stories out of them. I mean, yesterday it was Gyokeres followed a guard dog company, and then it was Sesko's agent followed Mikel Arteta or whatever. Like, it just feels like every single day people are literally digging into the depths of social media, desperate to find some kind of connection, desperate to find something that they believe to be, or that they'll pass off as some kind of hint with regards to what Arsenal are going to do in the market when it comes to that centre forward position. So on today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about what would represent a 10 out of 10 window for me. I've had that question quite a bit over the last few days. And so I figured it would be a decent discussion, seen as, you know, in terms of actual, as Fabrizio Romano would say, concrete updates. There isn't a great deal really to kind of dive into today. So I figured we'd do a bit of that. Now, just to be clear, a little bit of context around that, because I'm one of the people that always says you can't actually judge how good or bad a transfer window is or was until much further down the line. And therefore, when I say what would a 10 out of 10 window look like for me, what I mean is, what would Arsenal need to do in order for me to just sit back and go, look, don't know how it's going to pan out. Don't know what this is going to look like in 12 months' time. With hindsight, are we going to say good window, bad window? Don't know. But what I will say is the 10 out of 10 window for me is the window that I look at come September and go, I don't really know realistically what more I could have asked of Arsenal. Now, that doesn't mean that I think it's going to definitely work, because, as I say, there's an element of risk to every transfer, and there's certainly no way of truly judging a transfer window until much further down the line. But a 10 out of 10 window for me is the kind of window where I'll put my feet up at the end of it and go, who knows how it's going to pan out, but at the very least, we did as much as I could realistically expect from the football club. So we'll get into that. Lots of hellos in the chat. Let's get into that. Big hello to Jid. We've got Rumble. We've got Joe. We've got Hawkwind. We've got Nasir. We've got Paul. We've got Sharpie. We've got Zach, Afsar, Melissa, James. Loads and loads of you with us live in the chat. So thank you all so much for being with us on this live episode of the pod. A couple of quick messages before we continue into today's content. If you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. It really does help. And subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, reviews are very much appreciated. And a massive thank you to those who signed up on Patreon yesterday. We had a load of people sign up yesterday. After we shared a clip of our Martin Zubimendi scouting video that we've done over on the Patreon side of things. You can go over there, you can sign up, you can get access to this stuff, and you'd be supporting the podcast. Plus, you'd get all the normal episodes ad free, which I think is quite important to a fair few people. So none of the adverts, none of that nonsense. You'll be able to go over there and get those episodes, as I say, ad free. The link is in the description below. And yeah, maybe we'll play that clip of the Zubimendi video again at some point on today's show, just to give people an idea of what we're doing over there and what you can get access to if you sign up. Right, let's do this then. Shall we talk Victor Gyokeres? Let's talk Benjamin Sesko. What's going on? What's the latest? So in truth, we don't really know. Sorry for the anticlimax, but we're hearing a lot about Sesko. We're hearing a lot about Gyokeres. It felt like yesterday the momentum swung back towards Victor Gyokeres. And the reason I thought, at the time we were live when Fabrizio Romano dropped that update that he'd basically told Sporting that he'd been in conversation with the president on the telephone, and he told him, look, I'm not going to play for this club anymore. My intention is to leave. I'm not going to train. And I'm unhappy about the fact that this exit pact that was said to have been agreed has been sort of gone back on by the club's president, who's been very vocal publicly in saying, look, I never told Victor Gyokeres he could leave for this amount of money. He's a very good player. He's a top player. I think he said he's one of the best players in Sporting's history. And so we're going to make sure that we get what we deserve, and we're going to be compensated accordingly. So there's all that drama going on in the background, as far as we understand. And I was a little bit skeptical around those reports of a kind of falling out and disagreement, because we didn't really have that much to back that up in the early stages of that being reported. However, when the president comes out and says what he did, that kind of made it clear to me that there is obviously some kind of disagreement and some kind of issue there. So, right, we'll see how that develops. But actually, when you think about it, Fabrizio Romano's update yesterday, it didn't really change that much, did it? We'd heard loads from people saying that Arsenal have made contact, that Arsenal have made a bid, blah, blah, blah. I'm really struggling with all this stuff. And the reason I'm struggling with it, right, is because for me, there are so many journalists out there that I've got immense respect for. Some of them, because of my job, I know in person. I know personally, I should say, and I know quite well. And so for me, I never want to sit here and shit on anybody's work. And I've said it over and over again. I know that a journalist is only as good as the information that they're provided, and therefore a journalist is only as good as their sources. But I also know that you can have a source that was right on 9 out of 10 things and then comes up with a bit of information that doesn't necessarily come to fruition. Things can change. Someone might say that Arsenal have opened talks with Sporting Lisbon. Fast forward 2 weeks and those talks don't materialize into anything. And then there will be people out there that go, well, you said we were in talks with Sporting Lisbon. Now, just because it didn't progress doesn't mean it didn't happen, doesn't mean it wasn't true at the time. And as we all know, things can change very, very quickly in football. But the reason I'm struggling so much with this transfer window in particular is because there's so much contradiction of one another when it comes to some of these journalists. Some of them have been really vocal. A lot of the really vocal sources have been from abroad. Those that we normally associate with being kind of really close to Arsenal and having their finger on the pulse haven't really said that much about Gyokeres or Sesko. And that rings alarm bells for me, first of all. But I just don't know what's what and who is who at the moment. And I'd be lying if I said I did. I've talked about things and shared my opinions and views on reports that we've had. But now I'm starting to question who's right, who knows loads, who knows nothing, and what this is all going to amount to, if I'm being completely honest with you. Now, it's not that I'm sitting here being negative and going, well, we're not going to get anyone. No, I'm not at that stage. I do believe genuinely that Arsenal are working incredibly hard behind the scenes to try and get something done. But I've kind of taken the decision this morning not to get sucked into every single report that we read. And listen, as a content creator and as someone who runs and presents an Arsenal podcast, if I don't discuss these reports and share my opinion on them, however credible I think they are at times, then what the hell would I talk about every single day throughout the month of June? I guess what I'm doing is putting out a bit of a warning to you that I will discuss things, I will share my opinions on things, but it doesn't mean that I believe every single one of those reports. But that doesn't also mean that we can't discuss them. So yeah, let's try for the remainder of the window to stay a little bit more grounded and a little bit more calm on it. I'd gone into the summer genuinely believing that Sesko was the number one priority. Now, my opinion on the player is kind of irrelevant here, because it's not to say that, I think he's the finished article. If you go back a few weeks, you'd have heard me say quite explicitly on multiple occasions that for me, Victor Gyokeres is the answer for now. And that Benjamin Sesko has, lots of potential and could potentially go on to be, someone really special, but probably isn't there yet. And, that's kind of been my opinion on the two players. But my opinion has always been in terms of who's the most likely that Sesko was the one. But the thing that makes me doubt the whole Sesko thing, right, is that if we really did have this interest going all the way back to May of last year, if we really did try last summer, if we really did try again in January, surely we would have had an indication and an understanding of what this deal would require. And therefore, at this stage, and we might be, but it's just not being reported, I don't know, but surely we would have an indication that Arsenal are a lot further along the line, unless the goalposts have moved. In which case, some of those reports that we've been reading and talking about recently might have a semblance of truth to them. I think the one that, really riled me up, and I'll source it. Where is it? Archangel Andrew, in the chat says, understand that, but naming the source would be the way to go. Most of the time we do name the source, but when 4 or 5 people are telling you the same thing and are coming out with very, very similar reports, like, do you want me to scour the internet and say X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and D all said blah, 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 blah? I'd just be wasting time. Like, we're picking up the general gist of the reports. For example, the release clause chat about Sesko, this idea that he wanted this release clause inserted, that initially came from Duncan Castles. So there's your source. And I did say that on the first pod on which we discussed it. Duncan Castles reported that. Others then followed up with similar reports. And, that, I have to say, got under my skin. The idea that this guy who still has a lot to prove would rock up into a negotiation with Arsenal and not only demand a salary that is way beyond this station, given the club are about to pay, if they do indeed move forward with this, a big amount of money to sign him. The fact that he would demand a crazy salary and then that release clause just, to me, was wild, and I couldn't get my head around it. Again, let me be clear. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's not. And, when I read things like that, and then a little bit later on, I read something from Miguel Delaney, to source another, who said that actually the difference in valuation between the two clubs now is at around about 10 million euros, which it doesn't feel like a bridge. Which doesn't feel like a gap too big to bridge. You start to think, well, is any of that true then? Like, you just don't know, guys. You just don't know. And I appreciate that with an audience, albeit a small one, comparatively speaking to some of the other podcasts and Arsenal channels, I've got a responsibility not to spread crap that I think is fake. But equally, as someone who is following this day to day and following the events and trying to keep up with what's going on and understand what's maybe got something to it and maybe what's a load of old codswallop, I've got to discuss a lot of reports. And that's where we are right now. And that's where, we've kind of got to. I will say I'm at a place now, and I'm in a place now where I'm kind of getting a little bit sick and tired of it all. I mean, could you imagine that we signed none of them? Could you imagine we went for someone completely different, completely left field? And then you start to think about maybe the approach. Again, we've talked about the approach before. Is it a good thing to get lots of conversations going to understand the situations of multiple players before deciding which one to pull a trigger on? Some will tell you it is. Others will tell you it's not. I think it's got pros and cons to it, that approach. But then, is it a diversion? Is it a diversion tactic? Is Andrea Berta cooking up something else behind the scenes that we haven't got wind of yet? The truth is, guys, we just don't know. And I would just say and advise at this point, do not get yourself too invested in any of these players, because if you do, you're probably going to end up disappointed or frustrated or something similar. You got to be really, really careful with allowing yourself to be sucked in. But look, quite frankly, I'm bored of it. This level of over analysis, it really does suck all the fun, doesn't it, out of a transfer and out of the buzz of signing a new striker, which should be a really, really exciting thing. There's a few questions coming through in the live chat. We normally do the questions a little bit later on, but you know what? I'll take them. Why not? Let's do it. Let's change it up a little bit. Kevin says, Harry, do you think we're evaluating which striker to sign depending on which winger we also bring in? We're going for Gyokeres if we think Rodrigo is on, but Sesko if Rodrigo is not possible. I like that. I like that idea. I like that theory. I do think that, look, we don't know exactly what the budget, if you like, is for the summer, and we rarely ever do. But what I think, we get all those reports, don't we? Those nonsensical reports of war chest this and war chest that and all the rest of it. I think for me, I look at it in a more kind of holistic way. I think Arsenal need more potency in attack, generally speaking. And I think Arsenal need a out-and-out number 9 profile. So if we can achieve the greater potency and bringing in that profile of player, I don't really mind how we choose to spread those funds. So, for example, if Rodrigo is available for 75, 80 million quid, but that means that you then need to go and get the cheaper option of Gyokeres and Sesko in order to facilitate that other deal, then I'm fine with that. Because when I zoom out, I think Rodrigo is a game changer, a needle mover. And I'm not convinced that Sesko or Gyokeres is. What I'm convinced on with those two guys is that they're that 9 profile that we need. So I'd essentially, if I were Arsenal Football Club and I chose to go that way, Rodrigo for the big money, slightly compromise on the striker and bring in the slightly cheaper option, if indeed that is how it turns out to be, in Victor Gyokeres, I'll sit and I'll go, well, fine. Because we've addressed the 2 needs that we want, and that should achieve greater potency in the final third. It's just not in the same way that maybe everybody else would have gone for it. But I'm not against thinking outside the box and thinking creatively. So I think there's a chance that maybe Arsenal are trying to understand maybe what the Rodrigo situation is before pulling the trigger on any of those strikers, because that could have an impact on their ability to go forward and do that deal. I don't know that, but it certainly makes sense, Kevin, and it's a really good question and a really good point. Guitar Solo says, would you rather have a player that wants to play for the badge but does not fit how we play? Or would you rather get someone who might be demanding as anyone trying to get work would, but fits us? So I guess what you're alluding to is it seems like Victor Gyokeres is really keen, and it seems like Benjamin Sesko, again, based on the reporting, is actually digging his heels in and wanting maybe a little bit more than what we think is reasonable at this point and at this stage. I think it's really important that the player wants to come. I think people will argue that Arsenal haven't got over the line yet and that there's still work to do, and I agree with that. But I think when you've accelerated the way that we have to a point now where you are literally going into every season expecting us to win the big ones, I think there's got to be a bit of a mentality shift and a mentality change. When you're a club that is still trying to get back to that competitive level and there's a player out there, you will probably have to go out and convince a lot of them, especially when there's other options out there, especially when there's other teams circling. You'll have to go and do that. And you'll have to accept that your position in the football order at that time dictates that you need to convince people you're the right place for them. You've got work to do to show them. I think if we were talking about like going and getting like Lamine Yamal, right? Just for example, just first name that popped into my head. Then of course we'd have to sit and convince him. Of course we'd have to move heaven and earth. Of course we'd have to give him every indication that this is the right place to go. And I'm not saying Lamine Yamal will join us, but it's just an example. I'm talking about a player of incredibly high status right now. Victor Gyokeres does not have that status, but it seems as though he is incredibly keen to come. Benjamin Sesko definitely doesn't have that status right now, but it seems as though, and again, this is based on reporting, and this narrative is born out of those reports. It seems like we need to convince him a little bit. And I don't think that should be the case. I put out a piece the other day where I said that I didn't think Arsenal were a stepping stone club. Got loads of heat for that online, by the way, from people saying we are a stepping stone club. Ironic that a lot of the people that gave me shit for that also criticize me when I say things like, given the circumstances last season, finishing second is by no means a disaster. Their response was, where are your standards? Well, you can't point the finger at people for not having standards and then believe that a player like Benjamin Sesko, who scored 13 goals in the Bundesliga last season and who's still very much on the development path, is above us. Do you see what I mean? Do you see how those two opinions cannot coexist? Some opinions can coexist. Loads of opinions can coexist. But those, no, they can't. So in answer to your question about whether I'd rather the player that wants to play for us, in a case like this one, where I don't think there's much separating the two, then yeah, for sure. If you're talking about one being miles ahead of the other in terms of class and caliber, then it's a different story. But in this instance, in this situation, I'd much prefer the one that wants to play for us, the one that wants to be a part of the project, and the one that wants to be an Arsenal hero moving forward. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about what a 10 out of 10 window would look like as far as I'm concerned. I'd love to get you guys' thoughts and takes on this from the live chat as well. So make sure you stay with us. We'll do that right after this very, very short pause. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Don't go anywhere. Like, subscribe, all the rest of it. Leave us a review if you haven't done so already. Remember, you can check us out on Patreon as well, where we've got 3 scouting videos out and available to you now. Sesko, Zubimendi, and Gyokeres all covered. Going to play you a very short clip now from the Zubimendi one that dropped just the other day. If you're interested, go over to Patreon and you can watch the full thing as well as the 2 others. Here's a little teaser of what we did on that particular piece of content. Check it out. He certainly enjoys getting stuck into the challenges, which I didn't think was necessarily a characteristic of Martin Zubimendi's game. Now, I appreciate and accept that in La Liga, it's different. This is him against Manchester United at Old Trafford. Look at that. Again, riding challenges, taking his time and picking out the right pass in the end. That's a lovely win back. Look at that. One sweep out to the left-hand side. He's not just won the ball back there, but he's managed to sweep it out to the left-hand side nice and early. Again, more of these diagonals out to the left-hand side nice and early. Look at that. Takes his time, turns, and then releases just at the right point. Again, taking it in his stride. Brilliantly done. Again, stepping in front of the ball receiver. And that comes from having good anticipation. That's a teaser of what you can get over on the Chronicles of a Gooner Patreon. Go check it out. Link is in the description below. Okay, should we talk about this 10 out of 10 window theory then? What would a 10 out of 10 window look like as far as I'm concerned? So again, at the top of the show, I said that, look, I don't think that you can ever fully judge a window until much further down the line. But in terms of what would a window look like whereby Harry Symeou at the end of it sits down with his feet up and goes, I can't realistically ask for any more. Looks like we got Kepa in through the door. Looks like we've got Zubimendi in through the door. So I think that for us to have a 10 out of 10 window, there's 3 more major bits of business that we got to do. And this doesn't include, by the way, the contract renewals that we should be working on, Saka, Saliba, all of that. We've already done Gabriel. We've already done Miles Lewis Skelly. That is a part of it as well. But just in terms of recruitment, I think there are 4 more bits of business that Arsenal would need to do to make this a 10 out of 10 window, whereby I sit back and I go, I can't realistically ask for any more. So Kepa, Zubimendi in. I think keeping Thomas Partey is one of those factors. And I know not everybody agrees with that. And I know there's a lot of people that are thinking he's done and moving on, and we should be looking elsewhere. Look at the players that we're being linked with, man, as alternatives. Agume might be a good player, might be a decent player, but he's 23 years old, and I still think he's got a long way to go in terms of his development before you're talking about him in the same breath as Thomas Partey. So because right now I can't see any credible links to anybody that I believe would come in and improve the squad, I think we've got to be still trying to work this out with Thomas Partey. Now, I know that the club will have limitations with regards to what they'd be willing to offer a player of that age with his injury history and all the rest of it, and the length of contract. I get all of that, but I think it's really, really important that if we lose him, we replace him. So for me, it's replacing Thomas Partey, because I can't see who that replacement would be right now. If not, then you got to go and replace him. So that's the first bit of business. Second bit of business would be to go out and get that winger, and for it to be the best possible winger in terms of the options available to us, it's got to be Rodrigo. So that's number 2. One of the strikers, Sesko, Gyökeres, or someone else, depending on if Arsenal pull a rabbit out of a hat. And the other signing that I think Arsenal should make, and this is at the bottom of the priority list as far as these 4 bits of business are concerned, but something that I still think we should explore, is to bring in another defender. And that is because we're going to lose Zinchenko by the looks of it. We've already lost Kieran Tierney. You can't go into another season betting on Takahiro Tomiyasu being fit. And obviously the player that we're hearing a lot about right now is Jurrien Timber. So that's an option. So 4 bits of business that Arsenal still need to do, Kepa and Zubimendi aside, and contract renewals aside, for me to be able to sit down, put my feet up at the end of the month, at the end of August, September, whenever the window closes, put my feet up and go, realistically, I couldn't have asked for any more. Now, whether it's going to come good or not, we're going to have to wait and see. But that's kind of where I'm at. Okay. Should we go back into the questions? Should we get some of your thoughts? Let's do that for the remainder of the pod. So if you've got anything that you'd like to hear discussed, drop it in the chat box. Let's get into that now. Okay, I starred a question earlier from Mr. Bate Red, who said, Harry, speak on the Timber interview. You mentioned you would look at it properly. So I've looked at a transcript of it. And I think Timber's quite open in talking about the fact that he was essentially pushed to play, even when he wasn't fit, even when he was feeling terrible. And there were points in games where he really struggled and didn't know how he was going to get through the remainder of the game. I tip my hat to Jurrien Timber. I said it from, the very beginning of last season. To come back after the injury that he suffered and to perform at that level was just remarkable. And it says so much about not just his overall physical capabilities, but, his mentality as well to push through those challenges. We knew that he was struggling through large parts of the season. He had to go off in games. He was, limping a lot, going down, receiving treatment a lot. If you watch the games closely, you got a sense of the fact that Jurrien Timber was probably playing way more than he should. And obviously the Ben White injuries had a massive part to play in that. And then the Tomiyasu injuries had a massive part to play in that. I don't know where I sit on this. I'm kind of 50-50 because there's a part of me that feels uncomfortable with the idea of a manager literally pushing someone to breaking point, which is what it sounds like was happening. Now, let me be clear. The Timber interview is in Dutch. I don't understand Dutch. Haven't got a clue. I've read a transcript of it, but what I will say about transcripts when you translate them is that occasionally they don't quite make 100% of sense. And while you can get a strong gist for what he's saying, it's very hard to gauge or understand the tone. Now, there might be some Dutch speakers in the live chat that have seen it, that understand it a lot better than me. And if there is, come out and tell me. Feel free to chip in and chime in with your thoughts on the kind of tone and the demeanor of Jurrien Timber when he was delivering those comments. I don't like that. I think that's wrong on the manager's part. what I would say is that last season we were desperate, and I don't know what else we would have done had we not pushed Jurrien Timber through. I mean, we saw Thomas Partey play it right back at times, so clearly there were steps taken when we really, really felt that that was the way to go. But yeah, I mean, it's not great to hear. It's not great to hear. But equally, it's not something I'm going to beat the manager up for based on what Jurrien Timber said in this specific interview. So I can understand why there's a few people that have looked at that and gone, it's really poor management. I can understand why some people have taken that as Jurrien Timber having a little bit of a pop at the manager and taking that opportunity to make that point. But I didn't originally think that this was a massive deal, and hence why I didn't go diving into this interview when a lot of others did. And having looked at it now, I think I can understand why some people want to raise it as a talking point and as a discussion. Fine. But I still don't think it's a massive, massive, massive deal. Yeah, look, hopefully White's fit next season. If we can get Tomiyasu back at some point, or we can bring in a Uriel Hato or whatever, then maybe we get to a place and a point where we can protect him a lot more, Jurrien Timber, which I think we need to, because he's a really good player and you don't want to finish these players off. Where I will level some criticism at the manager and at the club in general, and you know, I don't know if this is at the door of the medical staff or if Arteta was, you know, really kind of kicking the door down and saying, nope, I want them to play. You tell me that they can play, they're going to play. I don't care if you're telling me about risks or whatever. You know, I'm in a desperate situation and I need to get them out there. So I don't know entirely who's to blame, and it'd be wrong of me to sit here pointing fingers. But just as a general point, I do think we've run people into the ground over the course of the last 2 or 3 seasons. I think there was an element of bad luck with some of the injuries we picked up last season, but there's also a common theme. And that common theme is players ripping their hamstrings and having to have surgeries. And that is something that you can attribute to maybe at times some poor management, because it was the players that played the most football. You know, so to sit and call those freak accidents, I think is a little bit naive. Now, I don't think the luck was in for us, and I certainly don't think that helped. But I'm also not willing to put it solely down to luck. And I said this at the time, and I'll say it again now. So, yeah, I understand why people have looked at that Jurrien Timber interview and feel the way they do. Afsar says, Harry, do you think the football PSR rules are affecting transfers? After all, we have wasted a lot of money. Yeah, we live in a PSR world now, and people have to accept that. We also live in a world where the UEFA controls are quite stringent as well. And if you want to participate in European competition, that Arsenal do, you need to make sure you're in line with those as well. Look, I think the PSR stuff, where it's really relevant right now is the 1st of July. That whole kind of cut-off point, I think that's really important. And I think that you're going to see more movement come the 1st of July as a result and as a consequence of that. So that's where I think PSR is having a big effect. But I'm not going to go into this summer saying that, you know, I'm going to excuse Arsenal from addressing the positions they need to because of PSR. You know, when you look at the position we're in PSR-wise, from what we understand, there is a bit of headroom. Is there as much headroom going by the UEFA regulations? No, not quite. But there's still enough to be able to go out there and address, I think, the areas in which we need to. Oslo Guna says, feels like we should be using the loan market as well if we don't want to pay the money. This is a good way of trying out a player before buying. Yeah, but you're very rarely going to get top players that are in the form of their lives on loan, right? You tend to get players that are on the fringes, that are on the peripheries of stuff. And I just feel like we're past the point of taking risks and gambles. Think about when we brought Martin Odegaard in, right? We brought him in on loan, and that turned out to be a really good loan spell, followed by the permanent signing. And then he had 2 wonderful seasons, dropped off a little bit last year. That's clear. But do you get what I'm saying? Like there was an element of a gamble there and a risk, but we were at a point where we could afford to do that because things weren't changing dramatically. And, you know, we weren't playing in the Champions League, and we needed the money to come in from that. And we needed to find a way to get there and be a little bit more creative in order to achieve that. We're not at that phase in our development anymore. The last loan we did was Raheem Sterling. We brought Neto in last season, played 1 game. Okay, he was a backup goalkeeper. That's fine. But Raheem Sterling was just completely ineffective. And I just think there's a lot of PTSD that exists within this fan base. And to go out and do loan deals for players that are really not playing well at the moment, I don't think is going to be great. Henky Ho says that Danish media are saying that Arsenal have made a bid for Norgard from Brentford. I wouldn't be surprised if Norgard left, given that that Thomas Franks left. And would Norgard coming in, I think, would be a better backup to Zubimendi than maybe a Gume would right now. A Gume's got a higher ceiling. There's no question about that. But I'm not against Norgard coming in as a backup and as a squad player. But the price has got to be right. And by right, I mean relatively low. He's not a player I'd drop significant money in. Rumble says, what's your target for next season? Win the Champions League or the Premier League? As simple as that. That's what the target's got to be. What else have we got in the live chat? Lots of people bringing up this. One second, I'll come to this in a minute. Rumble says Lee had an interpreter on his show. Go and watch that. Is that Lee Gunner? I haven't seen that. But if there's an interpreter, I'll check it out because that will give us a good indication, I suppose, of what Jurrien Timber was saying. What am I talking about? What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. The idea that Liverpool are going to come and swoop away a number of the targets that we've been looking at for a while. There's been a lot of chat around this with Alexander Isak, and I've been saying for ages, I don't think Alexander Isak's leaving. I don't think Liverpool are going to see that as a viable deal, and I don't understand why Arsenal fans are really pissed off about it, given that no progress has been made on that front whatsoever. And I stick by that, and I'm now seeing people saying that Gyokeres is being looked at by Liverpool again. And who is that being reported by? You know, who is that being reported by? Because that's something you got to take into consideration as well. And talking of hijacks, I mean, didn't Liverpool sign Martin Zubimendi last season? I heard that if we play against him and he scores, he's going to reserve his celebration just to show respect from the 3 days that he spent at Liverpool. But do you see what I mean? Like, everybody was convinced that Zubimendi was going to Liverpool. And what happened? He didn't go, and now he's an Arsenal player. This hijacking thing, it can happen. It does happen, but I'm not worried about that happening to us right now. If we hear reports that are solid and it really does look like this is going that way, then by all means, lose your shit about it. For sure. But I'm not sure that I would lose my shit about it just yet. I just want to find these Norgard reports because they're being talked about quite a bit in the live chat. Where is it? Hold on. Norgard. Just searching this up right now while we're live. Hold on. Christian. Is that his first name? Christian? I think it is. Christian Norgard. Hold on. Can't find any. Like, who's it being reported by? Can't see anything massively credible. Okay, right. It's coming from Mads Velast, who is a sports journalist based over in Denmark, and he says Arsenal have already sent an offer to Brentford for Christian Norgard in the hope that the parties can soon reach an agreement on the deal. Now, if you go back a few days ago, I think Tottenham had supposedly inquired for Christian Norgard, and Brentford valued him at £45 million. Let me tell you this. Christian Norgard is not worth £45 million. And if Arsenal were to spend £45 million on Christian Norgard rather than going that extra mile to tie Thomas Partey down to another 1-2 years, I think that would be wildly bad business. Like, really bad. From a purely footballing perspective, that makes zero sense whatsoever. So fingers crossed that isn't the case. Norgard on the cheap, I'm all for it, because it always comes down to the point of risk versus reward, doesn't it? Particularly when you're plugging in holes, which is what we'd be doing with Christian Norgard. Zubimendi's going to be the starting six. That's the idea. So let's see. Let's see how it goes. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that develops. Alistair says, is there any news on the Man City case? Any idea when we'll find out the results? I've got no idea. But what I would say is don't hold your breath on that, because I'd imagine that they would probably have foresight of the decision before it is published. I'd then imagine that they'd get the right to appeal anything as well. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just guessing or assuming and basing it on things I'd heard in the past, in which case it could rumble on for a long, long time. A long, long time. Let's take a couple more from the live chat. As Fabrizio posted something about Arsenal. Hold on. That's what people are telling me in the live chat. Let's check it out. There we go. Kepa to Arsenal. Here we go. Deal done for the Spanish goalkeeper to join Arsenal as new backup for David Raya. Arsenal activate £5 million release clause from Chelsea, and all documents are now sealed. One more addition for Arteta after Martin Zubimendi. It's interesting, isn't it? Because although we haven't had the official announcements on these, we've got 2 players in this summer already. So when people say lack of activity, no, we are doing things. We just haven't done that one thing that everybody's desperate for yet. So yeah, let's see. Rumble says, to be fair, we've had 5 here we goes for Martin Zubimendi. Yep, farming that engagement. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Reese says, would you sell Martinelli and Trossard if we could get Leao and Rodrigo? And did you see Leao in an Henry shirt? Would I sell Martinelli and Trossard for Leao and Rodrigo? Yeah, because I think that pairing is stronger than the one that we currently have. So I would, but that is not going to happen because you're going to pay way more for Rodrigo and Leao as a combination than you'd ever get even close to for Martinelli and Trossard. Listen, until Trossard, renews his contract, his value is decreasing by the hour at the moment. I still think he's a good player and he's got a lot to offer, but just in terms of monetary value, it's not there right now. So you'd literally be asking Martinelli to shoulder the burden in terms of his transfer value to get those 2 players, which isn't going to happen. And did I see that picture of Leao in a Thierry Henry shirt? Yeah, look, Thierry Henry is an icon. And regardless of whether I agree with some of the things he says during his punditry, he's a legend, and his reputation is one that spreads far and wide and put Arsenal on the map in the eyes of a lot of people. So you can't dismiss or underplay his influence. No way. St. Francis, not Arsenal related, but says, what's this Lyon relegation about? Apparently their finances are in a really bad state. Haven't been able to prove that even with a couple of sales that they are back in a good position and a safe position. And so they've been relegated from Ligue 1, but they do have the right to appeal that decision. I think there's a good chance that they end up being reinstated to the French top flight. So that initial decision was announced yesterday, but they do have a right to appeal. So let's see how that goes. Let's check in where we're at on the likes right now. There's over 500 of you watching with me live at the moment. We've only got about how many likes? Let's have a quick look. I know it won't be enough, and it should be. So please, hold on. Here we go. Where is it? What is my phone doing, man? My phone is talking. I think I opened the video on another app and it continued playing even when I went out of it. Right. We got over 500 of you watching, just 123 likes on the board. Can we get to 250? Only requires half of you to press that like button. I'd really, really appreciate it. Any more questions? Let's get a few more before I sign out, because I got a fair few things to finish off today. I'm dreading it. I am on TalkSports Transfer Insiders tonight with my good friend Adi Oladipo. Haven't done a show with Adi in such a long time, so I'm really looking forward to it. We're on from 7 till 10 tonight, and you can watch that on your smart TVs. You can listen to it on TalkSport, watch us on YouTube, whatever you want if you're interested. And I'm sure, because I'm going to be there, there will be a fair bit of Arsenal chat if you're interested. Joe Musashi says, Harry, need a stream on raiding Lyon. Content, mate. Yeah, do you know what? Content is sometimes hard to come by at this time. Do you know what? Today, when I got up this morning, I was adamant that I was going to do something different, something that didn't involve talking about Gyokeres and Sesko. I led with it and did a little bit with it at the beginning. And then we talked about what I think a good window would look like. But now, where we're sort of rolling on you guys' questions, that's what it's all about for me during periods like this. Like, I'm so grateful that we got like a really amazing viewership and listenership that join live as well, because it makes a one-man podcast possible, and it gives me stuff to bounce off. So thank you for all your ideas. And if they are going to be relegated to League 2 and that is going to stand, then maybe that's something we could do. Although I would say, I think Man City have been raiding them already, haven't they? So yeah, who knows? Omar says, here we go. Zubimendi to Arsenal. Never in doubt. He was spotted drinking a coffee in a red cup on a beach in San Sebastian. Confirmed. Oh, that's what I forgot to talk about. That's what I forgot to talk about earlier on. So last night, when I got into bed, I started reading all this absolute crazy stuff about Gyökeres and this stuff about him following a guide dog company, or a London-based, not guide dog, guard dog, I beg your pardon, service. And I put a tweet out saying, let's just having a laugh. Gyokeres just followed a London-based guard dog service on Instagram. Must be a done deal then. I put the laughing emoji and the like doll emoji, right? And then I went to sleep. This was at midnight. I posted this. I woke up in the morning. Oh my word. The number of replies from people going, oh my God, it's happening. And then others going, you're talking absolute nonsense, mate. As if people could not tell that I was joking. That's wild, isn't it? This is what the transfer window does to people. Wesbird says, Harry, people like to argue the ownership aren't ambitious enough. What's your thoughts? Okay, so my thoughts on this are mixed, because I think we did spend and invest a lot of money over the last few years to get ourselves back into a competitive position. But if you are as ambitious as they say they are, which is they want to win everything, the league, the Champions League, whatever, you've got to go further. And the club, I guess, would push back and argue and say, yeah, but do you know what? There are certain restrictions that we are slaves to. We need to adhere to PSR. We need to adhere to the UEFA regulations. And I understand all of that. And they would probably say that we're trying to increase our revenues in other ways to help us with that stuff. I guess what I would say is, if it was only about winning the game's biggest prizes, I don't doubt that's the intention. But it feels like other owners are willing to not necessarily break rules, but are willing to try and find workarounds in order to allow themselves to go that extra mile with their investment. And that makes them more competitive on the pitch. Manchester City are being investigated for 115 financial breaches. I'm not saying you want to be in that position, but I think we could be a little bit more savvy, and we could be a little bit more streetwise, maybe. And that is just my opinion in terms of how we navigate some of the restrictions that we're under. But yeah, I think we're at that stage now where we need that extra bit of investment to take us over the line. And if we don't get that this summer, then I think people will be well within their rights, by the way, to ask that question and to really kind of hammer home on it. Afsar says, any idea what happened to the Garnacho rumors? I mean, Garnacho was wearing an Aston Villa shirt with Rashford on the back the other day and posted it on his Instagram. Is he going to Aston Villa? Who knows? I just think with Garnacho, I like the player. I think he's a talent. But the more I see, the more I hear, the more I read, the more I think he's the kind of character that you might just want to keep away. Martin says, Harry, let's have an early top 4 and relegation call. Relegation call. I might throw Brentford into the mix this time around. I think Sunderland will go down. I think Brentford will go down. And I think Burnley will go down. I think Leeds will survive, but that's my early relegation call. In terms of the top 4, I don't know in what order, but it will be Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, and probably I'm going to say Chelsea. For next season, but I might review these predictions closer to the new season, depending on how the window's going and all the rest of it. Ganto says, are you going to do that separate video to discuss Timber's interview? I wasn't going to be honest, unless people are really keen for that. Again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier on the live stream, I read the transcript of it. I don't understand Dutch, so it's difficult for me to analyze it in the way that I'd like. But it was a little bit worrying, yeah, to hear some of those comments and the way they were put across. So yeah, we'll if people want it, if enough people want it, comment it, not in the live chat, but in the comment section afterwards. And maybe we'll pick that up and we'll do something on it. But I need to get it translated. Also, I know a lot of people, when I ask for likes on the videos, they like the live chat. Don't do that. Like the actual video itself. It really, really helps. A big shout out to Jid, who pointed that out a little while ago, and it certainly did make a difference. So thank you for that. Look, I'm gonna wrap it up there, I think, for today. Maybe bring you something a little bit later on if any news breaks or whatever. We'll try our best to keep you across everything and try and react to stuff as quickly as possible as and when it breaks. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you all so much for your participation, for being with me on today's episode. And I'll see you all very, very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day up the arse. Goodbye.